experience being abroad in the Harlem?
Okay. Well, I study classics, which is, I studied Greek and Roman history and literature, and I focus primarily on classical New Testament Greek. And so I really didn't do any of that. I didn't study, or I didn't write Greek or translate Greek or really research too much in Greek and Roman history. But being in Europe, in that environment, you can just definitely see, for me, how what I learned in school is all over the place. You know, when it comes to politics, or when it comes to governments, when it comes to business, there's a lot of similarities and allusions from Greek and Roman history that you see prominent throughout Europe. And so even though the work that I did didn't really necessarily correlate with my studies, I gained a great, I guess, a different perspective, or I was a little bit more open to learn anything and everything that I encountered when I was in Europe, and.
Awesome. I'm sure that was a cool experience. Let's see. As a now graduate with a good job, what would you say to encourage current humanities students to, succeed post-graduation?
I guess some advice I could give to humanities students right now is not to be afraid to apply to companies, not to be afraid of the fact that, yes, you're not studying business, you're not studying accounting or economics, but that doesn't limit you in any way. For example, my very first internship, as I mentioned, was with a healthcare company, working there in corporate accounting group. Well, I've taken one accounting course at BYU, but that's not at all enough to really do what the job description said. And so, but at the same time, I wasn't afraid to apply and just to see what happens. And as a result of that, when I got into my interview, the person who interviewed pretty much just said, I was just really interested in talking to you because you're the very first non-finance, non-accounting person that's applied to this kind of position, and he just wanted to talk to me. And it almost seemed like he wasn't interested in giving me a job. He just wanted to talk to me because I was a classics major. And so then the next half hour in our interview, we just kind of clicked, and we just talked quite well and had a really good conversation, to the point where he was impressed with how I said, how articulate I was, and what I shared with him. As a result, I went to have more interviews at the company and ultimately got an offer. And so I think if I was timid and felt that I wasn't qualified for this and not applied, I wouldn't have gotten that internship. And so I think probably the biggest advice, one piece of advice I can give to humanities students, is not be afraid of the fact that you're studying humanities, not business or economics or accounting. You have the ability and the empowerment to do whatever you want if you put your heart into it, if you work hard as well. And so that's any kind of advice I can give is just apply and work hard, and don't feel that you are limited because of your humanities student.
That's good to hear. I definitely think for the audience that's going to hear this, they might go, humanities, it's not business or accounting, one of those where you feel like there's probably a guaranteed job at the end of the road. So what do you think, now for a different audience in mind other than just students, sympathizing with the same thoughts that you just said, but a little more briefly, just maybe restate those concerns. As a humanities student, you're not a business or accounting major, and you're maybe, I don't know if this is how you feel, but maybe, or how some humanities students feel, maybe feel like your future doesn't seem guaranteed. But do you think that an internship or getting outside experience while you're a student is something that kind of solidifies the possibility, or something that encourages that possibility down the road? Would you say that has a big key in that?
So really you're kind of going back to
what you said,
how important the internship is, and not being afraid to pursue internships as a humanities major, or?
Kind of. Well, I liked what you said about the whole, as a humanities student, you're not an accounting or business.
Sure.
You're not the typical major where you feel like, this is the job I get if this is what I'm studying.
Sure.
So in humanities, do you think it's? I just want the audience to kind of have that same understanding that you kind of just shared with us, but not this time, not saying it to students, but for the audience, to let them know there's a safety in
hiring someone
in hiring a humanities student, and that's because they have opportunities to be valuable in the workforce because they can do, you know, that sort of thing. Whatever your thoughts are, though, not my thoughts.
Sure.
You know.
Okay. I think, you know, I've read a lot of articles where they talk about where they kind of list the top 10 most useful majors, and this one article will talk about how liberal arts majors, they're very useful because they teach students to read and write very, very well, to articulate things in a very in a good manner. But then next day you'll read an article written by someone else that kind of lists the top 10 worst majors to major in, and they'll put liberal arts majors on there. And so, you know, I kind of look at those with a grain of salt and just kind of ignore them because, you know, the skills that you develop as a humanities major is very profound. I mean, you do learn how to write articulately and kind of think. And going into the business world, those are really the kind of skills that businesses look for. And that's something that I've noticed as well, is even though I'm working for a global financial firm right now, and I'm around finance a lot, they'll teach you what you need to learn. What they want is someone who can think articulately, who can you know, analyze and can write well. And so as a humanities major, you know, I don't feel that I was limited in my ability to apply to companies. I think that companies would be very strong and more well off if they could potentially look to hiring humanities students and kind of understanding why they chose to do humanities as a major and the kind of skills that they developed themselves, because we're kind of going into a world where the old paradigm has shifted in the sense that, you know, to get into finance you have to study finance, to get into consulting you have to do some kind of business strategy major, but you know, things are changing, and having that background of humanities, you do develop a different perspective of how to look at a problem, how to analyze a problem, and how to make recommendations to solve that problem.
Great. And do you think being a liberal arts major, when the company you work for now looked at your resume, what do you think stood out to them? Do you think maybe the internship was something, I mean, maybe it was the interview that you gave them, or I'm sure there were a number of things that contributed to that, but do you think that working for a professional company now and being on the other end, do you think they're looking for somebody with experience on their resume? Or will it give them a leg up?
Yeah,
you know?
Sure. Well, the company I work for right now, when I did my very first interview with them to get an internship prior to getting the offer to work for them, I remember sitting with the first person I interviewed with, who ultimately was the person who hired me. But I remember sitting there, you know, quite nervous, not sure what to expect. And the very first thing that she pointed out to was my internship in Europe, working for the European Parliament. She just kind of looked at me and just said, "How did you get that? Like, that's something I've never seen before." And as a result of that, I was able to explain how I got that internship, what that internship meant to me, and what I did, and how much, how influential it was for me in what I did. The other thing that she pointed out after we talked about that internship was my major. She's like, why'd you study classics? Why didn't you study finance or business? And then she talked about how, you know, studying classics, why don't you go off and be a professor? And I had to explain to her that I was interested in business, even at the very start of, you know, being at BOU. And so just those two things alone, my internship in Europe, my classics major, was what set me apart. And I was able to talk a lot about that and just kind of explain to her, you know, why I was valuable to her in the company, because I was a liberal arts major, because I did my internship in Europe. And I definitely feel that doing the internship, you know, helped me stand out from everybody else. And it worked because I got the internship with that firm, and then ultimately I got an offer from them.
Perfect. I think that pretty much wraps up everything. Maybe if you could just repeat the last thing you said. Being a liberal arts student or studying classics and having that internship in Europe was what set me apart, got me the internship, and got me my job now.
Sure.
That's just that simple, because we can only use little sound bites.
Right.
And try to keep your hands down.
Was I?
Because it would have been perfect just how it is, but your hand just barely, like,
Gotcha.
just your thumbs came into the shot. So I was like, I want to use that, but just keep your hands down and say the same thing over again. Just that simple last tail end of what you said was perfect.
Okay, there we go. My internship in Europe, as well as being a classical studies major, set me apart when I interviewed for the firm that I work for right now. It really stood out because they were very interested in that. They were kind of curious why it is that I'm studying classics and did an internship in Europe versus someone who studied finance or accounting. And as a result of that, as a result of me standing out with that major and internship, it landed me my internship with the firm as well as an offer afterwards. Want me to be shorter?
Yeah, just a little shorter. And try and say European Parliament, because I think to the audience they'll be like, wow, that's cool, just like your firm thought that was cool.
Okay, sure.
So.
When I interviewed with the firm that I work for right now, they are very, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think of how I can say it really short and articulate. Okay, got this. When I interviewed with a global firm that I work for right now, the very first thing that stood out was my internship with the European Parliament, and also was the fact that I was a classical studies major. And those two things alone made me stand out, and they're very curious about that. And as a result of those two aspects of my life, I was able to land a job with them through an internship and ultimately receive an offer to work for them full time. How was that? Was that okay?
Yeah, that was fine.
Okay.
And maybe one last thing. Thanks to my internship at the European Parliament, finish the sentence.
Thanks. Okay.
It's whatever you want to fill in the blank with.
Sure. Well, thanks to my internship at the
Wait,
European...
1 second.